Hello, everyone, and welcome to Capes, Cowls Masks, the show where we uncover the world of soups and science fiction. I'm your host, Jake Hart. I'm a podcaster, a sound designer, and a writer for the Fresh Take Hub. And as always, I'm joined by my fellow co-host.
Sup, bitches? It's T-Gaps, your boy, the comic book Shogun here. Yeah, I decided to change it up a little bit. Let's see, how are you feeling on that? Not liking that, Jake?
I mean, you've come in with quite the attitude.
I know. Well, we're talking about a film that's just balls to the wall attitude. And
that's true. So you're sticking to your Sup, bro.
Yeah.
Sup, bro. How you doing anyway?
I'm doing good. Been a bit of a stressful week, but happy to be here now talking about one of the best films of all time. Been getting into some super nerdy shit as well. I've started playing Knights of the Old Republic again. In preparation for that remake, because I've just been diving deep into old Star Wars lore. It gets weird, man. I kind of like all the Old Republic shit, though, and I'm until like they say something in the shows and films that contradicts it, I'm saying the Old Republic stuff is still canon. For me, anyway.
The Clone Wars references Darth Bane, so Yoda speaks to him, remember?
It does, and they have had like some small Revan references here and there. So
yeah, in Rise of Skywalker, there were some references to those Sith Lords and stuff. So are you alluding to like the remake that they announced ages ago, or like this new thing that was just like released recently? Like, did you see that new cinematic trailer thing?
Yes, I did see that, because that's kind of what also inspired me, because I was like, I need to get on the Old Republic and then play Knights of the Old Republic, but also because I am hyped for the Knights of the Old Republic remake that's happening, because it does sound like it's going to be like a ground-up remake, reimagined combat and all that. What I really like was for when they announced the remake to go, and now the Old Republic is canon again. And then I can be like, yay, the Rakuten Infinite Empire are canon again.
See, that was only my thing. Like, I'm like, cool, that's fine. I kind of wish you maybe remade it and gone like, we're just gonna change the story a bit and it's canon.
Yeah, just little hints there. Yeah. I mean, like, just either give me Old Republic canon or bring me the Yuuzhan Vong. I actually like the Yuuzhan Vong. I'm the only Star Wars fan who does, but give me the Yuuzhan Vong.
Yeah, definitely. So, Let's get into that this episode then and introduce our guests. So following our romance and superhero episode, which we did a couple of weeks ago now, which we had the wonderful Laura Filmer on, which was a really good conversation. Today, I think we're going to be looking at one of the most powerful love stories, coated underneath all sorts of action, philosophy, kung fu, sci-fi, and that is The Matrix. But we won't be doing that alone. We're going to bring a guest on who is, other than me, I don't know any other person who is a fan of The Matrix as much as me, and I can geek out about The Matrix as much as me. Welcome back to the show, Stefanos Florakis. How you doing, Steph?
I am exhausted. This year's been tough. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, the pandemic is hard and everything. But man, I was able to watch films from the Sundance Film Festival. And yeah, my bank account is crying because I watched 13 films. And don't get me wrong, great shit, like really great shit. Like, art house, independent flicks that I love. But I'm not going to lie, after a week of 13 indie art house films, I kind of want to watch trash again. Like pure trash. And that's why I went to see Death of the Nile, which is surprisingly actually quite endearing, which not everyone expected. But yeah, and I'm really looking forward to talk about The Matrix, which, yeah, like I never really thought of it as a love story, which it technically is. But again, I think it was one of those angsty kids who was always like, oh, it's not about the romance, it's about society and capitalism. And but you're right, it is about a love story. But we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, we'll get into it, because I was also one of those angsty teenagers talking about technology is going to take over us and all of that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I sometimes maybe got the wrong reading of it. This is going to be a two-parter. So this week we're going to talk about the first film that was released in 1999, talk about its impact, its legacy, and what it's left behind in film and pop culture, so much more. Later on in the week, we'll be discussing the sequels and the expanded world, so like the Animatrix, the comics, and all of that. We figured that The Matrix deserves the respect and the attention to be split into at least 2 episodes to focus on each thing. So let's get into it. The Matrix that came out in 1999. Steph, I'll start with you with our first question. What was your first introduction to The Matrix? Like, did you see it in the cinema? Did you have it on VHS? Did you watch it on DVD? Because I know it's one of those films now where everybody comes into it at a different point. So what was your first introduction to it? And what was your first reaction to watching this film?
Now that I was trying to remember when was the first time I ever sort of found out about the Matrix. But to be honest, I really don't remember. It's the Matrix is one of those things that's it's always been part of the zeitgeist, a part of my memories, which is, to be honest, quite funny. It's one of those very disturbing things of thinking, wait, is this the Matrix? Is it always part of my life? Is the Matrix real? Or because I really can't remember a time where that didn't exist. It's almost like the similar way how Lord of the Rings, Star Wars was at the time. It just was there, and especially part of the culture. I definitely didn't see it in cinemas because I was way too young. Now, for what was the first time I watched it? Again, I don't remember. I think it was from a friend's house, or it was on TV. Again, one of those very rare things because I still remember when I watched every Star Wars film for the first time. I remember, generally speaking, Lord of the Rings when I watched them for the first time. But The Matrix has always been there. And I think over time I sort of reducing myself to it and seeing something different each time. But definitely the thing that I remember the most about it is being, cool. How it used CGI, the form of editing, all the action sequences, and of course the bullet shot scene. It's the bullet time, which is it is an iconic scene because there is a fucking reason for it. Because everybody was doing it, and even the idea of someone wearing sunglasses and anything leather associated clothing, suddenly they're cosplaying the Matrix. It just became that. So yeah, was a part of it fashion because after that, not long after, started wearing a lot of leather and black clothing. God, my angsty teens were embarrassing.
Well, I think we're all going to share similar stories like that, judging by our age and the time this film came out. Tom, how about yourself? When was your introduction to the first Matrix film?
Yes, it's kind of similar to Steph in that, I was kind of always aware of the Matrix. I was aware of the iconic scenes of him, bending over backwards, dodging the bullets. I kind of knew various parts, the whole leather ensembles and that. I kind of knew about it, but I don't think I watched it until I don't know how old I was. But I do remember it was when I was on holiday down my nan's caravan, and I watched it on this portable DVD player because my dad was like, I've brought a load of DVDs. He's The Matrix. Have you ever seen it? I was like, no. And he was like, you should. So I just remember just being there, just in my bed, just kind of lights off in the caravan with a cup of tea, watching The Matrix for the first time. And it was an awakening. Completely blew my mind. I was just I did not realize you could tell stories like this, really. Beforehand, I wasn't really into film or TV. The only films I really watched was the Raimi Spider-Man films, the X-Men films, TV. It was just whatever was on the TV, the Simpsons, all that. So I wasn't really exposed to brilliant storytelling until really I came across The Matrix, and I was like, holy shit. Did not realize you could tell stories like this on film. Did not realize you could make stories like this on film. This is fucking incredible. And much like many other people, it definitely informed my fashion sense going forward, because I kind of went from the guy who was just wearing like blue jeans and maybe like a football top, like an Arsenal top or a Wales top, whatever, to all of a sudden just being black jeans, black t-shirt, black jacket. I need as many black leather jackets as possible. Get me the sunglasses. I need every kind of, I need some aviators and shit. I just need to like look badass all the fucking time. And like, even if it wasn't like directly in my mind of just like, I've got to look like him in the Matrix, it was a case of like, anytime I was going out, looking at myself in the mirror, just being like, kind of like I'm in the Matrix here. This is cool. I like that. So yeah, that I don't know how old I would have been when I first watched that film. I guess I would have been, I don't know, maybe like 12, 13, something like that. I was a bit late coming to it compared to other people, but yeah, it definitely had a profound effect on me, and is one of my all-time favorite films. So there we go.
Here we go. For me, I do remember it like quite vividly as well. And I was more, first of all, I was more aware of The Matrix before I saw the film. Primarily because there was more spoofs as well, because there was so many spoofs of The Matrix, you know, especially, you know, the Neo doing the bullet time. We get a little reference to that in Shrek, do you know? Or was it Shrek 2? It's one of them.
Yeah.
And I always, you know, I've just been aware, and I heard like almost like whispers of like adults speaking about, The Matrix. Have you seen The Matrix? All this sort of stuff coming, because I was just a bit too young at the time when it was coming out. And in a way, it almost caught my fascination, because so many people were talking about it, and like, and I was like, almost like the film itself, like Neo, I was like, what is The Matrix? Like, what is this thing that people keep talking about and I can't see? Like, and then eventually it was my dad, who every other weekend, I used to go spend the weekends with my dad, and we'd go to the video store, we rent out some videos, and I always used to watch Kung Fu movies with him. That was like one of our things together. A lot of Bruce Lee, a lot of Jackie Chan, Jet Li, that sort of stuff. And it was just this, he was like, let's rent out this one. You know, I don't think your mother would allow you to see this, but you're with me this weekend, so let's watch this. And like you guys, you particularly, Tom, it just blew my mind of what I think a film was at the time, of what I think was possible in filmmaking and storytelling. And in a way, like, even though at this point I'd seen X-Men, I'd seen Spider-Man, I felt as if with The Matrix, like, wow, this feels like an actual comic book come to life. From like the still frames of the action set piece sequences, to like the attitude of the film and stuff like that. And it made a huge impression on me. Fashion, like you guys, all of a sudden I wanted to have trench coats and black leather and Dr. Martens and sunglasses. And it also really impacted the music taste I had, with a lot of the metal, the electronic music that was in the blend of electronic music and rock and metal with Marilyn Manson, Rage Against the Machine, and all these other wonderful artists. It just had a huge impact me going forward. And it was primarily the aesthetic of cool, you know, it was like the epitome of a badass. And there was also like sort of, I was bullied a lot at school, and I had like these fantasies of like I was Neo, and like all the bullies were like the agents, and I was just taking them on. Like I used to have all these, you know, schoolboy fantasies and stuff like that. So yeah, it had a huge impact on me going forward. And then as I got older and dug deeper into the film, it laid the foundation of how I view the world, how I view technology, how humanity is portrayed, and all of that. A lot of my sort of moral compass comes from Star Wars, but more my logistical side and rational side, and how I view the world, the real world, or is it the real world? It comes from The Matrix. And it's such a huge, huge impact. And I mean, let's get into like how this film even got made, like the influences of this from the Wachowskis. Steph, let's start with you. Like, what do you think of the Wachowskis as filmmakers themselves? Like, I think as well, because at this time, you know, they were such ambitious filmmakers, huge imaginations, never directed anything before, wanting to make 3 films from the get-go. I think people forget that. They had a trilogy planned from the beginning, but the studios were like, no, we can't do that. They made Bound, and they thought, okay, let's go with that. But to go from Bound to The Matrix, like it's quite the jump. So what do you think of like that sort of early stage for the Wachowskis?
I mean, to be fair, even if you think about Bound, which uh, even for its yes, I don't think Bound comes close to the Matrix, but in some capacities, both sort of are kind of similar. And one in the filmmaking aspect, because they both are very, really wonderfully shot. They have some very interesting techniques that they've taken from other different genres, adding to them. But especially, both of them are quite anti-system, patriarchy projects that they kind of break the rules of what they can. I mean, Bounds right now is claimed as an quite modern queer classic, especially for its time, especially to have two female leads who are attractive to each other is very, even right now we don't particularly have that, and whenever it's when it's been done, it's not either as effective or feels as honest. And it felt very honest for back then, still does right now. And but again, still, even after Bounds, which did, it wasn't a huge success, but it definitely gained a cult following. To do something like The Matrix, which, and I know they've talked about it, there's books about it, of how they're able to manage to make it, uh, convincing Warner Brothers and everything, but still, the efficiency and the mere spectacle, including with something sincere, honest, but also very deep. It's something that even right now we sort of beg for it. It was made in '99, and at that point, with Lord of the Rings wasn't out, Spider-Man wasn't out. It was still a time where the '90s were very much or this kind of standstill of thinking of where does this decade actually belong to when we talk about cinema. And then The Matrix came out at the end of it. It kind of became one of those landmark films of the decade. And and even though I do like the sequels, I think we can all sort of agree, no matter what we believe about the sequels, none of them really managed to reach what the original did. And also many other films trying to replicate it couldn't achieve it. I would probably say the only other film that it not could say like it tried to be The Matrix, but it has the most similar filmmaking identity to it is Inception, and it's like, but it's like completely its own thing, and one of those rare cases of um, we're not trying to make it because you love this very popular film. We're trying to make something on its own, and then unintentionally we're starting comparing it to it. Uh, but yeah, but beyond that, I see The Matrix as a miracle of how it managed to happen. Or maybe it's just luck. Maybe out of all the big blockbusters that were made at the time, that was the one that actually made it. Because if anything else, like the previous year, 1998, there was another film called Dark City, which was very similar to The Matrix. And surprisingly, that didn't work for the audience, even though it is a pretty good film, but it lacked that, I would say,
Humanity.
yes, in some capacity. I think, like you said before, The Matrix is a better love story than Dark City is, and I think that is one of the many components that work.
Definitely. I mean, I think it's a mixture of a miracle and luck that it did get made, and also just dedication from the Wachowskis and being so single-minded in what they wanted. Do you know what I mean? I think that really helps now to have creators who go, I know exactly what I want, where it is. And Christopher Nolan is another example. He's another auteur director who knows exactly what he needs, where he needs it, and he doesn't overshoot anything, doesn't undershoot anything. And the Wachowskis are very much like that, but they're also incredibly imaginative, that they like to experiment with different things. But for me, when I look at The Matrix, I look at something that is totally unique, but also steeped in legacy, in terms of like, this is just a stew of everything that the Wachowskis loved growing up. You know, they loved anime, like the big inspiration is Ghost in the Shell, classic kung fu movies. They used to be comic book artists themselves. The Invisibles by Grant Morrison, the sci-fi novel Neuromancer by William Gibson, lots of philosophy by John Bulliard, Kevin Kelly, Alice in Wonderland. This is all the stuff that they loved. And I remember even watching the documentary of the making of The Matrix, where the Wachowskis are saying, we just threw all our ideas in one pot to make this movie because we didn't know if we could make this movie at all. And the fact that they relied so much on storyboards to bring in their comic book roots when creating these storyboards. Now, if you can get hold of it, it's a wonderful book, The Art of the Matrix, where they have the full film storyboarded. These aren't like the storyboards you see in any movie. These are comic book panels where you can feel the action coming from them, and you can feel the movement coming from them, you know, and this is essentially how they sold the film to Warner Brothers, because Warner Brothers, like, they bought the script and they were like, we bought something cool, we just don't know what it is, because it's such a complex script. And I think to craft these storyboards to say, look how awesome, this is what we want, is such an achievement in just getting a film off the ground, you know, like, it's incredible. I don't think it's ever been quite done anymore. You know what I mean? And to bring in actual comic book artists like Jeff Darrow, who's worked with Frank Miller and stuff like that, to essentially set the foundation of what the look of this film is going to be. Like, I just think it's incredible, like, how they even got this film made from the beginning. What do you think, Tom? What do you think of the Wachowskis as filmmakers? And like, they're like, as I call it, this stew. I always come up with food allegories when I'm talking about nerd stuff.
You do. It's weird, but I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, the Wachowskis are incredible filmmakers. There's no denying that. I don't know too much about like the origins of the Matrix other than what you've told me, Jake. And I've got to be honest, I've never seen Bound, so my knowledge on this is perhaps a bit limited. But yeah, I think just like, as you said, like the stew they got going to create this, it is like a perfect blend of kind of, and like it's also kind of like how I approach like my writing and stuff when I do it. Like it's not so much like I just come up with a single idea. It's more I take ideas from various places and just put them all together. And yeah, I mean, like, for example, the Invisibles as inspiration for it. It was actually quite funny because like I didn't realize it until quite a while that there was I remember reading the Invisibles for the first time and being like, something about this seems very familiar. I can't quite put my finger on it. It was like I saw an article a week after finishing Volume 1 of like, oh yeah, the Wachowskis cited the Invisibles as part inspiration for The Matrix, and I was like, of course. Also, how mad is it that I found this out a week after finishing Volume 1? It's like the synchronicity they talk about in Invisibles is real. But yeah, it's just like, it's so clear to see in the film where all their various influences come from, with the martial arts, which is just as good as you get in like some actual proper Eastern cinema. Some of the action sequences. The philosophy is like apparent to see. I mean, like, I think they actually do a really good job in the film of like laying out these incredibly complex ideas, but making it in a way that everyone can easily understand. Whereas now you can genuinely have a conversation with someone about like existentialism and just like, you know, like imagine that like you can't know that someone else is thinking something. You might be the only person in existence. You like, now it's easy for people to understand because you can just go like the Matrix, you know, it's like the Matrix. And then they're like, I get it now. All of a sudden you're talking philosophy. So I think it's a film that it makes people cooler when they watch it. It makes them smarter when they watch it. And I think it's also a film that helps like open your mind to like new things. Like you said, Jake, with the music, like it definitely had an effect on the music I listened to, because after finishing it, I was like, I now need to listen to all of Rage Against the Machine because this just sounds fucking amazing. I definitely got more into like Hong Kong cinema afterwards because I was like, I want more martial arts stuff. And it's definitely had effect on me now because like just occasional evenings, I will literally just sit here on YouTube watching videos discussing like really deep philosophical like concepts, and all that stems from me watching The Matrix. So yeah, I just wish I could say more about its origins and maybe talk about Bound a bit, but I've not seen Bound, and I'm really sorry, but I'll try and watch it before the next show.
You've got some homework to do then.
Okay.
Speaking of that, we're talking about philosophy and the coolness of the Matrix. Like, Steph, for you, like, what is your reading / interpretation of the Matrix? Because I think it's so complex and filled with so many interpretations, so many readings. I feel as if different people come at it different ways. So what's your interpretation of the film?
Okay. The Matrix is one of those films that I sort of, because like I said, because I've always kind of known I came with stages. It's, for me, beginning was just, oh, this cool sci-fi action flick. And then obviously as I was starting understanding stuff more about the world, my own environment, I started seeing more things. And to be honest, I there was a point that I was very certain to what it was about. But now as I'm getting older, I am not certain. And to be honest, I think it's one of those things that this is how I now approach with the majority of films. It's again, I'm going to mention it again. Inception is one of those films now that I have multiple interpretations each time I watch it. But in the end, I just go, maybe just doesn't matter, because what really matters is, like in Inception, a cop finally moves away from his guilt, or in the case of the Matrix, Neo knows exactly who he is now, and he is released. So maybe that's what the Matrix is about. Maybe it is a sort of allegory for coming out, and especially knowing about the Wachowskis and how they, over the years, they started coming out and transitioning into to who they really are. Maybe it's sort of an early stage of their rediscovering who they are and creating who they are right now. And that is the one interpretation. I think this is the one, I think, the most personal and emotionally fulfilling explanation. Now, for what the film itself, a matter of plot and story, well, capitalism bad, machines bad, fuck Zuckerberg, fuck Elon Musk, down with the system.
Fuck all those guys before they were even on the scene. They knew what was going to happen.
Yeah, and to be fair, also, but again, if you look at it in the more socio-political area of that time, it very much represented that very early sense of fear and of what our technological evolution will happen, and like almost everything in proven by our history, unfortunately, whenever there is some kind of technological or scientific evolution, it somehow gets fucked by the humans. And that thing that was supposed to help us, suddenly it's our demise. Although there, and if you, and now we're going to talk next time when we talk about the Matrix, there are the explanations or hints, especially when Morpheus talks, basically this big exposition scene of just explaining what happens. He does actually say that, oh yeah, the sky is all dark because we fucked that. we did that shit. And what did the machines do? Well, they had to survive, so we kind of gave them no choice in that. And that was another thing I started realizing, when, especially after reading a lot about colonizations and segregations. So once it comes to the point of just completely putting a group of people to the absolute limitation of extinction, use there is always is and far more extreme reaction to it. And depending on which side you are, it might be not that be that bad. But of course, because it was during that time, and because the generation that ended up loving it, I don't want to say they were simple-minded. I'm going to say they were one-sided. They were just seeing the flashes, and they just interpret the flashes as the most obvious explanation. But I do believe there are far deeper allegories within it, and I think that's something that I do appreciate the sequels doing, and especially Animatrix. And thus, that's why maybe some fans kind of hated them because they didn't like the explanation. But that's for next week.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in due time. Yeah, I mean, I agree with all your points. I think for me, it came in stages. Like at the beginning, I saw it as this pure action-filled, badass aesthetic sort of thing, and like, and I still to this day like. I look back at all like the action movies that have come out in the last 20 years or so. I'm like, they still don't touch the Matrix on what they were able to do in terms of scale, choreography, attitude, cinematography, lighting, all of it. It just all works. And then as I was growing older and started getting a bigger brain and understanding more about the deep philosophical stuff, for me, it was always relating to Neo's journey and his, journey of choice, of destiny versus choice. That's what always struck to me. And again, we'll talk about the sequels next time, but it's the final beat in that fight against Smith. He's like, why do you persist? He's like, because I choose to. And that's why I love all three films, because to me, it's just one story. It's this one story of Neo finding himself, self-identity, know thyself, and the journey he goes on. And it was something that I sort of related to growing up as a teenager, of discovering who I was, and experimenting with all sorts of music, fashion, sexuality, and all these different things. And I think in a way that there is no true interpretation of reading of The Matrix, and I think that's what makes it such a great film, is that the Wachowskis filled it with so much stuff for people to explore. Like they said, they threw all their ideas in this one film, and that different people can find different elements of stuff that they relate to. And as of recently, now with more awareness of the trans community saying, hey, look, I actually see this as a trans allegory, as in, all the stuff with Neo's journey, the pills, the use of names and stuff like that. So, and it's great that they now see that them, and then Wachowski's knowing the journey that they went into and going, well, yeah, that's what we had in mind from the very beginning. Just unfortunately, during the time of the film was being made, they couldn't maybe really say it publicly, or didn't feel comfortable to say it publicly about it, what it was truly about. So that's what I love about this film, is that there's so many different interpretations and readings of it, and so many powerful themes that everyone can get something from it. So I go to you, Tom, then. What do you get from this film?
Yeah, I mean, like, what's amazing to me is, like, when I first watched The Matrix, I got, like, so much out of it in terms of, like, the philosophy, and, like, it's definitely, like, I know we're not there yet as a society, and maybe we won't get there in our lifetimes, but whenever we do get fully fledged AI, The Matrix is definitely going to be in my mind when we talk about, like, how we deal with those AI. But yeah, down to like what the Wachowski saying, like, yeah, we always kind of intended this as an allegory for, the transgender experience. I remember at first hearing that, and I was like, oh, I guess I can kind of see that. And then I watched the film shortly after, and I think it was within about 20 minutes. I was like, I don't know why I was thinking I can kind of see it. It's patently fucking obvious. It's so fucking obvious, written over everything the film is. And I think it's wonderful, especially if it has helped transgender people, like, find their own identity and be able to, like, come out. So I think that's wonderful. But yeah, the philosophy in it is just so deep and dense, and there's just so much to discuss there. And I think I can probably discuss it better when we get to Animatrix and we talk about the Second Renaissance, which I think is one of the finest pieces of Matrix media ever. Mm-hmm. But it is just that thing of, like, at the end of the day, like, if you take from the Matrix the AI, the robots, the machines are the enemy, I think you're fundamentally misunderstanding was like Steph said, the humans brought it on themselves. Like a good example of this as well, like outside of the Matrix, which I definitely think this whole thing was influenced by the Matrix, is in the game Mass Effect. There's a whole thing where you've got these AI called the Geth, and they're meant to be your enemy in the first game, but then you learn through the rest of the game, so hang on a minute, there's a lot more to this, and it turns out they only turned against their creators because their creators started to kill them. Now, if you start killing an entire species, what is that species going to do? Is it really going to sit there and just allow you to wipe it all out? Were the machines in the Matrix ever just going to go, oh, humans don't like us, fine, we'll just let ourselves go extinct? No, they're fully sentient beings, and I think that is an important thing that I think the film was trying to get across as well, is just that everyone has their own experiences, everyone has their own shit to deal with, but ultimately we're all part of the same struggle, so really we should all be working together. I don't know if I've worded that quite as nicely as I was hoping to, but my brain's a bit fried today. I think, yeah, as Jake said right at the start, much like The Boys, this is a love story first and foremost. The Neo Trinity thing is prevalent throughout all three films, and it's a huge part of Resurrections as well. Resurrections was basically what got me on Jake's side of going, yeah, no, The Matrix is a love story. It very clearly is now. And yeah, I think just everything the Matrix has to say, whether it's about identity, whether it's about technology, whether it's about love and connection and all that, I think everyone is able to get something out of it. What I personally get out of it is that humanity as a whole is fucked up.
Yes,
that's basically what I get out of it. And I think as well, like it has helped me in terms of like pushing myself to kind of like find like my identity, because that's something I've always kind of struggled with, like because I've always had like so many different hobbies, different interests, like something as simple as like what career do I go into, just like like it's all about choice. Basically, that's what I mostly take from the Matrix, is like that whole concept of choice. How much choice do we really have, and like how important it is that when you actually do genuinely get given a choice that you have full control over, that you take that control with both your hands and you do not let go of it. So I think that's ultimately what I get out of the Matrix. It's like, even though the Resurrections came out and was saying like choice is an illusion, I think it's more that just like, whilst there are a lot of choices that are illusions, at the same time there is control within those choices that you've got to like try and grab holds to. So that's kind of what I take out of it anyway.
Which is another big theme within the Matrix, is this sense of control and who has control within our relationship with technology. Do we use the machines, or do the machines use us? But no, yeah, it really cemented how I view technology. Like, it was this and Dune, because Frank Herbert also had some things to say about how we use technology. And it was basically like, no, this is a fantasy setting of like, yeah, evil robot overlords, sort of thing. But the film's saying, though, we fucked up. It was us humans who gave into the robots and gave into our own fear of something that was different, something that could be superior to us. And eventually, like, I think Morpheus even says, like, we don't know who struck first, them or us, but we know that we did. We blot out the sky. And in my head, I'm like, oh, we definitely struck first. Something that I picked up on as well, like, in my later years of watching this film and getting way more into anime. Now, I've always been into Ghost in the Shell, because knowing that was a big inspiration for The Matrix, and I've always been into Akira, but watching more anime and understanding a bit more anime, getting more into anime itself, I'm then looking at The Matrix in a different lens of like, in a way, when people say, well, they can never make a live-action anime film because it just doesn't work. It's a total different form of medium in a way that it can't be told. That's why when Hollywood tries to do Ghost in the Shell and stuff like that with Scarlett Johansson, and it just doesn't work. But then I look at The Matrix. If somebody says, well, what's the best live-action anime film? I go, well, I'm kind of cheating here, but it's The Matrix, because it has all the elements, it has all the DNA of what an anime film should be. It has the bombastic type of action. It has this serious amounts of exposition, which you only really get, like, for some reason, Western audiences hate exposition. Like, it's just something about Hollywood and Western cinema, but in Eastern cinema, man, they chew that stuff up. Like if you want, especially anime like TV shows, it's exposition, 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 cool action set piece, exposition, exposition. Like it's just full of it. And again, going back to Nolan and Inception, that's another, like, I would say after The Matrix, a sort of like anime type film where it's just this anime vibe to it with tons of exposition and crazy action set pieces that you don't see in Hollywood and Western cinema. Tom and Steph, what do you think of that? Am I left field here, or?
No, I think you're quite right, and I definitely agree with your points that like exposition is not very well received over here. I mean, like I think it's different for me because I've watched pretty much every episode of Dragon Ball through Dragon Ball Super, and also every episode of Doctor Who. So I'm used to exposition at this point. I'm so used to it that it doesn't faze me. And half the time when people are complaining about exposition, I'm just like, wait, that was exposition? I thought that was just a line being said, explaining. It's just like, oh, how are you today? I'm well. Oh, that's exposition. He's explaining how he's feeling. This is fucking shit. Atrocious. I'm leaving. But yeah, I do get it in the sense of, you know, like in Dragon Ball where you have that thing where it's just like the fight is happening, but then you cut to like Roshi explaining to Krillin like, oh, I'm going to explain to you exactly what's happening here, what this represents to the wider universe, and why you should be terrified right now. And yeah, sometimes it does feel a bit heavy-handed, a bit forced, but I think Matrix handles it quite well because obviously you're going through the film like with Neo and learning along with him. So it would be kind of weird if they like said like, oh, Neo is in the Matrix now, and then they just cut to a scene where he's like, oh, well, thanks to it for explaining the entire history of this for me. Now let's get back onto the plot. And you were just like, well, no, give me the history of the fucking world. Like, what were you told? What were you taught? So I think it works in that way. And I also think that I do agree that like the Matrix is probably as close as you can get to a live action anime without it being shit. Looking at you, Cowboy Bebop reboot.
I think what the Matrix does though is that it tells exposition through action. Do you know what I mean? And I think a perfect example of that is when Morpheus and Neo are in the construct, you know, and it's not an action scene in the sense of like there's guns and there's fighting, but there's a lot going on. There's a lot of camera shifts. There's a lot of exposition coming from Morpheus, but we're going from the TV. All of a sudden we see the chairs and we're like, wait, why are the chairs there? You know? And then he explains the construct, and then we go to like what the real world looks like and stuff like that. So there's a lot of action happening in that scene while Morpheus is giving this monologue about telling you everything that's going on. So that's why I think they do really well in that sense. And the scene prior to that with the red pill and blue pill, the mood and everything about it is so cool, and just the setting of it is wonderfully shot that you it doesn't bother you that he's just telling you about how deep the rabbit hole goes and all that. It's just wonderful. I mean, we've spoken about them now through here and there, so let's talk about the cast. Like, I mean, they just absolutely killed it, like every single one of them. Now I know like Keanu Reeves and Lawrence Fishburne were already sort of in the scene, and they'd done a couple of movies by this point, but this really just catapulted them into a next level of stardom. Steph, what do you think of the cast overall? And also, like, what do you think of like the Wachowskis' initial idea to have Will Smith and Halle Berry play Neo and Trinity, because they really wanted to go for, again, such progressive forward thinking in 1999 to have such a diverse cast, which we already have, you know, Morpheus, Tank, Dozer, and the Oracle, who are all people of color. They even wanted the other two leads to be people of color. So what do you think of all that? And then the cast that we did get.
I would say I have a very complicated relationship with Will Smith.
Don't we all?
And I do think that if he had done The Matrix instead of Wild Wild West, maybe his career would have been so much different. But I do wonder if he had done it, and if he wasn't trying to be himself, he was trying to be Neo. I wonder if maybe he would have had, you know, that moment, like Neo had that moment of awakening. If he had also like been like, wait, I could be more than me.
I can see the code. I still think, even though I agree with you with the Will Smith thing, I don't know if maybe we would have got the same film. I still have to give full credit to Wachowskis for wanting to do this in 1999. To have effectively a full black cast for this film, and on top of everything else going on in this film that's giving Warner Brothers major headaches during production and pre-production.
The thing is, I do wonder if if they did end up having that initial full black cast, would the meaning of the film would have changed completely? Because then,
Well, a lot of people do pull out themes of race and social injustice within the Matrix as well.
yeah, they were already there. But I would imagine if that would have happened, it would have been so much more apparent. And also, I'm a big Halle Berry fan. I'm really, I really love her. And again, this is one of those actors that I feel that she had a really many years of bad luck. It's not her fault. I think it's just the industry is just full of shit people. So so I do also one of the other things that I do wonder what it would have been if she was Trinity. But again, Carrie Ann Moss, she's a delight. She's an absolute treasure. So which again, Carrie Ann Moss is another one of those another actors, very similar to Lawrence Fishburne, which both of them had quite a strong experience in the field, but there was this kind of gap in the 90s for them that kind of reignited their careers, and now they kind of become these iconic characters. Which huge shout out to Lawrence Fishburne. He's been in the industry for many decades, and only took him in the 90s to become an international star. So again, that in the 90s, so fucking rare to actually happen, and especially for a blockbuster film. I mean, even me growing up in Greece, which I'm going to say right now on record, not extremely progressive, actually not progressive at all, especially in the 90s and early 2000s. And the fact that I was seeing a lot of Greek kids quoting, referencing, and idolizing Morpheus was a huge deal for me. And I didn't realize until I became a teenager and started realizing how shit the world is. So,
Yes, when your mind was freed.
freed. Well, what is freed if I realize I'm caged?
Well, yeah, that's true. As Cypher would say, would you take the red pill, or be like Cypher and be like, ignorance is bliss, my friend?
Ask me in 10 years.
See what happens.
I don't think anyone wants to be like Cypher. But
No. Then that's another biblical reference there, like him being like the Judas character within this, because there's a lot of like Messiah hero's journey story it's steeped within this as well, which I love. Tom, what do you think of the cast? Any particular favorite characters? And
I love Tank and Dozer. I kind of wish we had more time with them. Yeah, I mean, Lawrence Fishburne as Morpheus is just, he was perfect in the role. Like every line delivery, every like movement he made, he was just perfect. I absolutely loved him. I don't know how truly it's like Steph said, if they had gotten Will Smith and Halle Berry in as Trinity and Neo, that might have not completely changed the trajectory of the films, because the Wachowskis obviously already had the trilogy panned out, but I feel like it definitely would have altered some things. And I don't know if necessarily for the better. I mean, like Will Smith for me can go either way. Halle Berry is an amazing actress, but then Catwoman exists, and that's always in my
not
mind.
Her fault.
Not her fault.
No.
I feel like she did the best she could in that movie. Okay, you had to remind me of that scene, didn't you? Okay, no, I take that last line back because that. But yeah, I think you are. It's great that they had such a diverse cast in '99, and I think like the best thing about it is that like, obviously like it's not like I was watching the film and like all of a sudden 5 years later I was like, wait a minute, Morpheus was black, but it was kind of the case where it was like, I wasn't like, it was just normal. Like all these people were so badass and cool that like it was just a thing. It didn't matter like where they came from, like whether they were black or white. They were just all so fucking cool. And So I'm actually quite happy as well that like Warner Brothers kind of like didn't like push back on any of this. And if really the only thing that was stopping Will Smith being in the film was him choosing to do Wild Wild West, it shows that maybe Warner Brothers were quite happy with having, people of color as leads in the film. So would have been a very, very different film universe, but I'm very happy with the cast we got. I mean, Keanu Reeves he's
Bay.
He's wonderful and delightful, and I love him so much because he hates NFTs, and I think that's beautiful. Carrie-Anne Moss as well, just like I can't imagine anyone else as Trinity. She just, anytime I see her in anything now, like even when she showed up in Jessica Jones, I was just like, Trinity, oh my god.
Actually, definitely one thing I want to give like a praise, specifically to Fishburne and the immaculable Hugo Weaving.
Hugo Weaving.
Not even mention Hugo Weaving.
It's specifically, which kind of goes back to what you guys were talking about, exposition. Because even though I grew up with anime and all this stuff, I do have to admit I'm not the biggest fan of unnecessary exposition, and worse than unnecessary, boring. And what I mean boring is, come on, play with the shots a bit more, do more with the sets, play with the editing. There's a flow to it. Like everything else in art form, there is a flow within your art. Again, it's an exposition. It doesn't have to be just words, words, words. It can be something within it. And that is something both Fishburne and Hugo Weaving did really well, but they did it in a way that it was neither too campy, not overtly serious, but it still was serious and sometimes campy, and specifically Weaving. I mean, it's...
And Fishburne as well, at last.
It's the over-dramatic stuff that very fitting to the film itself. And like you also say yourself, like the fact that when Morpheus and Neo were talking, there was big exposition dump. There was this different set designs, the different editing moves and everything. That really helps. That I don't remember who was it, but it was Professor who was talking about how you can teach children with dyslexia. By the way, I'm dyslexic as fuck. I'm dyslexic. Well, there you go. and they said that the best way to educate these children to new words or words they cannot able to speak is to put it in a phrase, and with the phrase you put them in with different images for each words, and by showing one by one in a pattern, they are able to follow the sentence, and then they actually end up learning the words. And basically, that's why I watch films all the time. That's how I learn English. So there you go. and that's basically what they do really well in The Matrix. And this is where I think they really seem to understand how to use it, and especially with their actors. And to be honest, I think that's something the sequels sort of lost some bits, even though I liked what they were saying. I have to agree that it's not as exciting as all the exposition scenes in The Matrix.
No, I agree. Yeah, the exposition in the sequels was handled way differently than in the first film. But man, you mentioning Hugo Weaving, like honestly, for me, one of the best movie villains of all time. Like Hugo Weaving's performance, the voice he pulled, Mr. Anderson. And for me, I just go back to it's not the first time we see him, but the first time we really understand who this character is. And it's the interrogation scene. You know, when he brings out the file and the way he just flicks through the pages, and then he's like, so in one life you're this, and he's like, and you help your landlady take out her garbage.
It's that face he pulls afterwards when he's just like,
yeah, he's just incredible. It's just a little bit. So he's amazing throughout the trilogy. He's so good. So yeah, shout out to you, Hugo Weaving, who then went on to do the Lord of the Rings after this. So he had a good few years of work ahead of him. Last thing on the cast is I really want to shout out to the character Switch, who I've always been a big fan of the character Switch. Just her look, how the fact that they're all black and she's the only one dressed all in white. And then as, watching behind the scenes and digging more into the making of the film, I found it really interesting that, again, back in 99, the idea for Switch was that she was meant to be an androgynous character. So in The Matrix, they would be a woman, and then in like the real world, they would be a man. And I love that the Wachowskis back then were already wanting to put this idea forward in the film for people to get awareness of this. And unfortunately, it was one step too far for Warner Brothers, and they were like, "No, we're not going to do that." But I think you can still get a vibe from that in just Switch's look, just the way she carries herself as well. That she maybe has a bit of a, maybe she is, that maybe they are an androgynous character.
I always definitely got that vibe from Switch, whether like I knew it or not at the time when I was quite young, but I definitely got the feeling the Switch was a very, fluid person. So, yeah.
Steph, any comments on Switch?
First of all, fuck you, Warner Brothers. I feel we've been saying that for over 2 years now. So yeah,
I feel like we haven't said it in 2022 yet, though.
Oh, true.
They've been good so far this year.
Yeah, this is our first fuck Warner Brothers of the year, and Steph got it. Woo.
Good. But yeah, like to be fair, maybe it was one of those things that I sort of always knew, but I've never noticed. I mean, that's basically literally how it kind of sort of like came out also myself, like because I think I don't know how to explain this. It's this subliminal. My dyslexia is hitting me right now. Those messages that you did not realize, that started kind of interweaving with your psyche and awaken something inside you. And you guys did mention before, like the film itself is very much about choice. I don't necessarily think it's about the choice. I think it's far more the idea of being, of who you really are. But this kind of presents an allegory of a system that does not allow you to be yourself, that always tries to give you a role, a personality, and in this case, and gender. And seeing that in 99, or in my case would have been early 2000s, I felt very related to Switch, or at least to how she or they appeared. And it took me like many years, nearly 2 decades, to realize that I also kind of fit to that kind of demographic of saying, I don't fucking understand the gender roles. Like, why the fuck am I supposed to be this way or the other way? Fuck that. Fuck you. I'm me. And so, yeah. It was this one of those things, like I kind of wish we had more of Switch. And to be fair, I wish we had more of all those characters in the crew, because generally speaking, I actually really liked all of them. But the unfortunate thing of doing a 2.5 hour film, you can't do a lot with everyone. You could try to do just enough. They did do just enough. I think my biggest, I think I feel more disappointed because we didn't get that good of a crew for a while. I know we said next week, but to be honest, I don't particularly care any of the characters in Reloaded or Evolutions of the new ones. I don't care.
The new crew, yeah. No, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I liked Link because of the connection between Tank and Dozer, but everyone else I wasn't on board with. And yeah, it is a shame that, we didn't get to spend as much time with them and that they did kill them off. But I also think, like, I wouldn't have it any other way, because all their deaths meant something in that film. Like Switch as well, when she's not like this. So good.
Yeah, because it felt like almost something that Switch always imagined it would happen, but it was the worst one as possible. So yeah, again, like, it is very effective. And every time I show the film to a friend of mine for the first time, their reaction to the deaths is effective. So yeah, still spending an hour in revolutions just seeing all these people I don't care.
Well, let's get into some other aspects. Like, I think, as we've already spoken about, the action, like, that is one of the biggest things about The Matrix. And I almost feel like it's unfair that I hold this film, like, as the sort of, like, bar for any, like, modern action movie to meet now. Because it's almost unachievable what they did. And it's almost unfair because Western cinema doesn't do action scenes like this because the Wachowskis wanted, martial arts, 70s style kung fu movies coming into these films, to be a part of the aesthetic and all, part of the stew, as I say.
Part of the broth.
Part of the broth. The fact that they got in Wu Ping Yun as a choreographer, who is an absolute legend and also a film director himself. The fact that they got the actors to do 6 months of training before shooting the film. Like, to this day, that doesn't happen. Actors maybe get 6 weeks, at most before they have to start shooting. But these guys, they brought in, the 3 leads and Hugo Weaving to train for 6 months to do these action set pieces, to do these fight scenes, because the Wachowskis were really insistent on having them framed and shot like kung fu movies, where you're actually seeing the actors play out the moves, dance these moves. You're not doing this quick cutting that we get in a lot of action movies nowadays, and half-assed choreography, if you ask me. We want to see the fight. We want to see the moves. And I just love the commitment they did in this. In the wire work as well, you just get such different type of action scenes with wire work and expressionism. Like, so fucking good. And that's why I just think the only ones who have come close, in my opinion, of recently, funnily enough, have been the John Wick films. Which are directed by Chad Stahelski, who was Keanu Reeves' stunt double in the Matrix films. So it all comes full circle in the end. Steph, I'm pretty sure you have a lot to say about the action. What are your thoughts?
Not much to add, to be honest. You said it pretty nicely. I think the key factor why we don't see these kind of action, or at least we don't see other action films being as close to this in the matter of quality, is because the cast got trained for a long time. And to be fair, like, I understand the reasons why now it's not as feasible. It's very expensive. It's extremely demanding, and we shouldn't even mention. But the thing we should is about COVID has really changed shit. So I think we should just embrace the thing that now this pandemic will be our norm for a while. And to ask someone during a pandemic for 6 months to train for a film, it's extremely demanding for multiple levels. And yes, John Wick's definitely is the closest one in matter of action films and that kind of level of precision and quality. And I do really love every gunfight, which again, I'm a John Wick fan. I love Hard Boiled, and just seeing that in a Western film, and especially in that kind of big budget sci-fi philosophical epic, is extremely rewarding. And I don't think we're going to see something like that for a while. Like, we didn't even see that in Resurrections, which was a bit disappointing. But
which was kind of the point, though. I think that's what we'll get into that.
We get into that next week.
Next week.
We keep getting ahead of ourselves.
We keep getting ahead. I know.
We're in 1999 and we're staying there.
We need to stay in the moment. Tom, what do you think of the Matrix's action scene? I mean, the gun fu as well is just. I just think of the lobby scene, and then the rooftop scene is just full out gung fu. And seeing those pillars reduced to absolute nothing.
The action in the Matrix really is like second to none. And even though you do get films that not like I said, not so much try and copy it, but like, are inspired by it, and they're trying to be like, oh well, we want to make scenes that are as good as the Matrix, and it's just like, yeah, I don't know. It's like, even if like technically, like the actors are like technically fighting better, and like the action is tighter, it's just the Matrix, as you've said earlier, just had that attitude. It had like everything working for it. It wasn't just the action and like the gung fu. It was also the way the scenes were shot. It was like seeing these like fucking brick pillars like pulverized. It was seeing like all the main characters basically get the shit kicked out of them, and getting them like all bloodied up, fucking hair like everywhere. It was just, it's I don't know. It's just not. It's something that's very, very difficult to recreate, and I don't know. Just the action scenes definitely do stick with me. The ones you mentioned, like the one on the rooftop, and also the lobby, is just some of the best action scenes in cinema. Really, I mean, and even just like Morpheus and Neo training in the dojo. I mean, just that is fucking great. Just the whole, I know kung fu, show me, and they're just like, oh, they showed us.
And again, with the training, like I watched like the making of, and Keanu was like he is now at 56 years old. Like he's the first one in and the last one out at training, even requesting to do Sundays. Oh, can we do, just a couple of hours of training? Like this guy is a machine. He's a professional, and he just loves doing what he does. And I think you can clearly see that the Matrix, in a way, set him going forward of what type of actor he was going to be, like fully committing to the whatever role he was doing.
I think that's the big one that actually makes it work, is the fact that these actors loved doing this. Because if they didn't love it, I think they would have been apparent, and also they wouldn't have trained for 6 months. So the fact that I actually enjoyed doing this and putting so much effort, it pays off. So yes, Hollywood, please hire people who wanted to do the shit. Don't force them making stuff they don't want to. You did it in the 30s and 40s, and look at most of them. They died really early from either drugs, suicide, or maybe executed. We don't know yet.
Yeah. I also want to kind of talk about, we briefly talked about this, like the look of the film, like down to like the cyberpunk aesthetic, the costumes, production design, like the visual effects, the bullet time. All of it was revolutionary, all of it unique. Tom, I go to you for this. Like, does the fashion of the Matrix take you back to your teenage years?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Every time I watch that movie, I'm just like, oh, this is like so 90s, early 2000s, just like edge, attitude, angst. Yeah, so it does take me back, because I was also full of just anger and angst and attitude when I was a teenager. But yeah, just like the aesthetic of the movie, again, it's just like unlike any other film. I don't think any film could ever like truly recreate it. It really just was like a product of its time, and yet somehow it's become timeless. I don't know how else to put it, really.
And if anything, as we grow as a society and evolve as a society with technology, it becomes more relevant.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just, even if they go like, oh, look how big their phones are, look at the floppy disks he's using for hacking, at the same time all the messages in the film, you're just like, God, are we in the Matrix? Am I just a brain in a jar? Am I a brain in a jar, Jake? You can't tell me. You can never tell me if I'm just a brain in a jar, because I can never know if you're real.
But you can learn kung fu.
I can. I know taekwondo. Does that count?
I mean, he did learn taekwondo in that scene. It comes up. So.
When I noticed that, I'm just giving like a brief, like, hey. It's like solidarity.
Jiu-jitsu? I'm going to learn jiu-jitsu. Love that. But yeah, Steph, what about you? Does it also take you back to your angst teenage years, dressing up like these characters?
To be fair, my angst was inspired by a lot of shit. Like, God be damn. But definitely in the Matrix, definitely one of those. Sunglasses for sure. Although soon after, I suddenly realized I have chronic headaches, and I need sunglasses anyways to go anywhere. So, well, there we are. But I think what really is what makes it visually, aesthetically, the Matrix is specifically cinematography, like especially the green undertone every time they go anywhere inside the Matrix.
The use of mirrors,
The use of mirrors, the kinetic energy with each scene. Whenever they're still, there is always a sort of purpose to it. All of that screams the Matrix. Although I'm still not the biggest fan whenever we go to the real world, which I think that's always been a problem with me with this franchise. Although I do believe that this film does it a lot better than all the other ones. There's sudden change of mood, we're seeing all the blue and being very slow and depressing.
See, I kind of like that though, because I like that it's such a change, and that you see that, like even like in the production design, where the real world it's all more organic and there's like cables everywhere, it's all messy, and like they're all messy and stuff like that. And then you go in the Matrix and everything is straight, everything is squares. If you actually look, everything is like tiled and squared, meant to give off like a grid sort of look to it, and square and robust, and not stern. I'm not moving at all, like that sort of thing. And I just love the difference there. So,
well, yeah, don't get me wrong. In a creative and storytelling point of view, I absolutely understand why it is. I think it's far more of a me thing, because whenever we go to the real world, even though you guys said about the floppy disks and the phones and all that stuff, surprisingly, every time we go to the real world, that feels more dated to me than anything else. And I think it's what I call the Star Wars 70s issue, which you watch the first Star Wars film and you're like, I could definitely say this is just cardboard. I was thinking, well, definitely someone back then thought the future would look like that. It doesn't. And also, this doesn't look like a galactic map. It looks like it's someone thought of a sonar scan and it says put some dots on it and think of the planets.
Steph, I'm just going to advise you now, be very careful, because unless you want me to go into a rant about why the Star Wars technology and aesthetics make sense canonically, because we could be here all night.
But no. It's not about that.
It's all about the Rakutens.
No, my problem is not about that. So I think it's far more the issue that multiple different sci-fi films did exactly like that. That was my issue. And because, especially in the 90s, we had this very specific idea to what a sci-fi film looks like.
Dark and gritty.
Exactly. Like it is all like the big, like maybe it doesn't help that I was around the same time I watched the Battlefield Earth.
Oh, God.
And I think there was a trauma out of that. And so whenever I see that kind of aesthetic anywhere else, yeah, it just triggers me.
But yeah, I think like on this subject, I think I'm like in agreement with both of you. It's like I really do like the dichotomy of like the real world versus like the Matrix and how they set it up differently. But kind of like you, Steph, I do find when they do go to the real world, that's when I'm kind of just like, might just have a quick break and make a cup of tea. It doesn't grab me as much as when they're in the Matrix doing stuff. But that being said, like it still works. It's not like I'm there hating the scenes. I'm not like, oh my God, just get to the cool action stuff already. But I definitely think I fall like in the middle of you two right now.
Oh, but again, I don't hate it. No, I do actually love it. It's just, I think in the matter of repeat viewing, it's always the one that I'm like, oh yeah, the real world is shit. And the food is shit. Maybe I should take the blue pill.
I mean, to be fair, they did blot out the sun. There can't be that much good food there.
There's not much growing in.
But by let's not talk about resurrections.
No. Next week, right. Let's finish off with one little fun one. Steph, in this first film, what is your favorite scene if you can pick one? And like, do you have like a particular line? And it can be anything. It could be like a really meaningful line, or just the way it was delivered, or what do you think? Where's your head at?
You know when you told me
that line, I love that one.
That's a great line.
Okay, I'm gonna say one line. It's not my favorite, but it is the one that I reference all the time. Whoa.
Whoa.
Actually, you can't say that because that was originally coined in Bill and Ted, not The Matrix.
You see, that is why I didn't say it, because that's why I love it so much, because it's one of those very weird meta shit that I am very into. Talk more about it next week. And yeah, so that's why I didn't want to say that officially. But it definitely is the one that I reference a lot whenever I watch the film, and especially with friends. Now, my actual favorite line, I don't know if it's a line, to be honest. So I have a thing for monologues. Like generally, like I wrote a script for my dissertation for my BA degree, and it's filled with monologues because I just simply love them. Mainly because monologues, similar to expositions, they can easily reveal a lot of stuff about the character that is acting at the moment. And because it's a line that very much was very on point to how I was feeling at the time. And it's definitely something that I'm watching out. I'm like, yeah, you're right. He's right. Is it's Mr. Smith. That first moment where we're seeing like, oh, he's not just a program. He's starting saying the whole monologue about humans being a disease.
So fucking good.
Like the whole thing, which is for multiple reasons. Like, and this is also my favorite scene because this is where, again, the editing, cinematography, the directing, all of them, and it's fucking Hugo Weaving. I'll be saying that for weeks now. He just delivers this both menacing, terrifying, and extremely campy performance, which all of a sudden, for what we thought this was just an emotionless program with no personality, all of a sudden has all the personality of the whole Matrix, and actually revealing that he is a person, he has ideas and actual wants and philosophies, and that is where suddenly what initially what we thought of the Matrix being this very one-dimensional world suddenly becomes 3, 4, 5th-dimensional, because all of a sudden realize that the program can be more, and that's where Hugo Weaving brings the fucking whole game, and the whole monologue of just giving his own philosophical idea of humanity and the philosophical idea of the Matrix. It's because when he started realizing, like, oh, if machines have ideas and feelings, then what the fuck is happening here? Then maybe the Matrix is not that different than our own world.
It's a wonderful scene. And yeah, Hugo Weaving plays the shit out of that scene when he goes, humans are a disease. Like, it's just so good, so good. For me, like, I have loads, like two funny ones. One I already kind of mentioned is two simple deliveries by Lawrence Fishburne as Morpheus. The first one is when Neo first meets him and he turns around, so dramatic. You have the lightning in the background. At last. And then there's the one before that when Neo first speaks to Morpheus on the phone when he's in the office. And then like Neo gets up and he sees the agents and he goes, "Oh shit!" And Morpheus just goes, "Yes." So good, it's just so good. But I think for me that again, so many wonderful scenes. But one of my favorites and one that I always go back to and just go, psh, my mind just keeps on exploding with this is when he meets the Oracle. And it's also not just the scene with the Oracle, but it's leading up to that scene, you know, where he's talking to the spoon boy and, you know, there is no spoon, all of that sort of stuff. But it's when he's talking to the Oracle and, you know, don't worry about the vase, and he knocks the vase and he's like, now what's really going to fry your noodle is like, would you still have done it if I told you? Like, you know, and it's just crazy sort of stuff. And then she gets into the themes about identity and, you know, look up there, know thyself. And she knows exactly what she's doing in this scene. Like, she's giving Neo the information he needs to hear at this time. And it all works out in the end because she's giving him the choice of what to do. And then he comes to that choice later and he thinks about that specific moment. So, and this is why I think it's all about subverting expectations of what we think of as the hero's journey, which Wachowskis double down in the sequels, but you get the little first bit of it here with the typical thing would be, yes, you go to see the wise person, and the wise person says, yes, you are the one, this is what your path is, this is what you need to do, this is your training sort of thing. But the Oracle in this sense is going, I don't need to tell you what you already know. You need to make the choice yourself. And it's sort of ambiguous in a way. You sort of think, is he the one? But you're still thinking, but he's the lead character. He has to be the one. There's something else about Neo that he hasn't quite tapped into yet. And I think the Oracle knows this and is allowing Neo to go on this journey by himself because she understands the importance of choice. So that's why I love that scene so much and what it means for Neo's journey when he first meets the Oracle. So good. Tom, what about yourself?
Yeah, I've got like numerous favorite moments. Like I said, the deja vu scene is one of my favorites just because of like the whole subtlety of just him being like, whoa, deja vu, and everyone instantly turning towards him and be like, what the fuck did you just say? I don't know why. It's just a small scene, but I just really like that. I also really love Neo and Morpheus with the kung fu training. I think like that's full of great moments. Like, come on, stop trying to hit me and hit me. Like bits like that. I love as well like this one line like Morpheus says where he says, throughout human history we have been dependent on machines to survive. Fate, it seems, is not without a sense of irony. I also love like the Agent Smith monologue as well. Like every mammal on this planet instinctively develops a natural equilibrium, all that. But what I also love about that scene is after Agent Smith is done with his monologue and Neo's just still like, yeah, wow, that sounds like a really good deal, but I think I got a better one. How about I give you my finger and you give me my phone call? I just love the delivery of just, how about I give you the finger? I could probably sit here and quote The Matrix all day. It's got so many fucking great quotable lines. But yeah, I think that those are some standout ones. I mean, like, it seems like a cop-out to say the Agent Smith one after you've all said it, but just it is.
But it's one of the best moments in the film.
Great cinematic, but cinema. Rob is going to be listening to this right now, just like, yes, Tom made a pun earlier, and now he's doing the cinema thing. This is great. Turning into Rob slowly.
He's infesting us like Agent Smith. Like,
oh my god, that's why we're doing Batman month, because we're all Rob now, and he's just
he's taken over.
No, we wanted less Batman, not more.
Now we got a whole month of it, but yeah.
There's just I don't think I can ever point to just one single scene in The Matrix, which is, I mean, I also love the bit where like Trinity reveals to Neo just like, yeah, you can't be dead, Neo, because I was told I would fall in love with the one, and I love you. And it's just,
you can't be dead because I love. So good.
That's hit me so hard the first time because I was just like, because like in that moment, it was almost like it didn't actually matter to Trinity whether he was the one or not. She was just like, well, no, you have to be, because you can't be dead because I love you. And it's just, it's just so beautiful, man.
It's so good. And again, in 99, it's that role reversal. It's the girl saving the guy in this case, which again wasn't that common in 99. But yeah, like you, I could quote this film nonstop. I could keep going on about it. Try to contain this, and as we keep saying, next week, as we get into the sequels, because there's so much more to explore in this world. So we're going to end it there. Steph, thank you so much for coming on board. It's been a pleasure having you on here and talking about The Matrix.
No, all the pleasure is mine. I could literally talk about The Matrix for 2 more hours.
We're gonna.
Easily, very easily we could. And that's just on the first film.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think the one thing I'm very grateful for The Matrix is the fact that, like you said earlier on when we started recording, it was this mixture of all the things that these filmmakers loved. And I think it's been happening for a while now, but I think is films like Into the Spider-Verse, or in generally speaking, all these new filmmakers like Jordan Peele, Greta Gerwig, they're all now doing films that are collages of films that they love themselves as teenagers, children, and young adults. And now we're living and even in the superhero world with No Way Home, Multiverse of Madness, like now we're starting seeing these filmmakers trying to bring this meta contextuality within big blockbuster films. And to be honest, I think a big thank you should be on The Matrix, because this is kind of proves the point that cinema is doesn't or cinema is cinema. Cinema is inspired by cinema itself or multiple versions of cinema and from different other mediums. So yeah,
It's all cinema. And it's all thanks to The Matrix, a hugely influential film on cinema itself, socially, politically, pop culture. What a film. Definitely one of the best films ever made, in my opinion, and definitely up there in like top 3 like favorite films of all time personally. But yeah, thanks, Steph, for coming on board, and we'll see you very shortly as we do part 2 of our series of shows, The Matrix Revisited. So thank you all for listening to this episode. We appreciate people coming on board every week, listening us to discuss and geek out. But Tom, if they want to continue the conversation, where can they find us?
They can find me on Twitter at Comic Book Shogun, where I will be fighting for AI rights to make sure that we don't make the same mistakes that we did in the Matrix universe.
Yes, we can't be falling down that path. Steph, will you be on Twitter as well, trying to make sure we don't fall down that path, or by using Twitter in itself is falling down that path?
Have we already entered the rabbit hole?
Yeah.
well, I don't know, but you can follow me on Twitter at SY Florakis, and you're just gonna see me retweeting stuff about one of my favorite films of last year, the worst person in the world. And believe me, it's not actually that bad of a person. So, so if you
Don't
find,
give away the twist. Oh,
I mean, I don't want to give the wrong idea, but definitely I don't do as much to help for equal rights for OAI, but I do try my parts in other areas like stuff and things. I don't know. I'm working too much.
that's amazing. You have sold yourself so well there. Everyone, Steph does stuff and things. All right,
Go follow Steph for
For
stuff and things.
Steph and things.
Steph and
That's what you should call it. Oh my God.
That should be your handle. Steph and things.
Actually, that's not bad.
It's not, is it? It's
That's
quite
pretty good.
It's really good.
Imagine that being like, follow me on my YouTube channel, Steph and Things. People will be like, have you checked out the new Steph and Things video? Oh my God, we've just branded you.
We've got your thing. There's your new podcast right there.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Two things I got out of this this recording: getting a new handle and doing next week as a hashtag.
Yeah.
Let's do it. You can also find me on Twitter at SweatyJake, talking about all sorts of geeky stuff. And I'm also on Letterboxd, so you can catch me at Jake Hart to catch all the films I've been watching and rating. And as for the show, we're on all the socials as well, Twitter and Facebook at Cowls Masks. And a little bit of housekeeping as well. We have actually moved our domain host from Anchor to Acast. We appreciate everything Anchor have done. They've been a wonderful host for us, but we've decided to move to Acast, so you can now catch us on Acast, and we're still on all the usual sites: Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcasts, but we're now on Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and YouTube, so catch us on there if one of those is your preferred streaming site. Subscribe, follow us all on there, and if you're on Apple as well, please leave us a rating and a review, as it all helps us go up in the rankings. So thank you all for listening. We'll see you all very soon for part 2, Matrix Revisited. Goodbye.